Today, I'm going to give you the 5 rules you need to remember when you're writing a novel and 5 rules to follow to build a successful career in publishing and writing genre fiction. So stick around and learn how you can be an instant bestseller by following my 10 rules. Hi there. I'm John Hartness. I'm the founder of Falstaff Books, professional editor, and the author of over 40 novels, including The Black Knight Chronicles, Bubba the Monster Hunter, Quincy Harker, Demon Hunter, and a whole bunch of other things. And I want to share with you my rules for writing and for building a career in publishing. And I guarantee absolutely nothing. Come on, let's be real. Y'all have seen enough of my videos at this point to know that I'm not going to promise you the moon and the stars or really even a patch of dirt out of my front yard. The way this came about is I was scrolling YouTube the other day and I found a booktuber who had produced a video responding to a set of writing rules that Jonathan Franzen published in an article in The Guardian. And then he mentioned that Chuck Wendig had done a response with a pile of Chuck's rules for writing that Chuck published on his blog, Terrible Minds. And I looked at these sets of rules and I started compiling my response to all of them. And then I realized that Franzen's post and Chuck's blog were almost 10 years old. And I thought, wow, I don't think I really want to respond to a bunch of writing advice for an industry that hadn't seen COVID yet, because the world is a very different place today and the publishing industry is a very different place today. Not that Franzen's rules aren't still pretentious and Chuck's rules aren't still profane and hilarious, but I decided to come up with my own rules. So welcome to Uncle John's rules for writing and building a career in publishing. We've got 5 of each and we're going to alternate as we go through. But before we get deep into it, and you know I'm going to be working off notes when I put the readers on, let's talk about writing rules for a minute. Because at the end of the day, they're all kind of crap. I'm going to give you the best advice that I can. And I believe that most people giving advice sincerely mean to be helpful. Nobody sits down to record a video or to write an article or a blog post with the intent of harming people trying to get into this career. But the fact of the matter is that Jonathan Franzen couldn't tell me bupkis about how to create my career, because Jonathan Franzen's not an urban fantasy writer. I couldn't tell Jonathan Franzen how to create his career because I'm not a literary fiction writer. Chuck Wendig is an urban fantasy and genre fiction writer, and Chuck can't tell me how to build my career because Chuck broke in earlier than I did. And I broke in earlier than a lot of other people. And the time when you get started does have a lot to do with what works for you. A lot of the tactics that we used in self-publishing back in 2009, 2010, 2011, they simply don't work today because the industry is much more diverse, it's much more professional, and the quality of books on the top end is much higher than what most of us were producing 15, 16 years ago. That doesn't mean there aren't some truths to all of these sets of rules. A lot of times you learn more about the person telling the rules than you do about the topic they're espousing on, and save your psychoanalysis of me for the comments. Hey, Gandalf. You want to come say hello? Let's see it. Come on. Hey, buddy. We got the big floof. Come on. Come say hello to everybody. Gandalf has come to say hello. Can you tell by his face how little he enjoys being manhandled? I guess cat handled like this. But he's my buddy. So if I'm doing something, he wants to do it too. Come over here. You can't lay on my notes or drink my ginger ale. Or you can. No, dude, we've had this conversation. Please don't mess with the crap on the shelves. Come on. Kids. Anyway, there's a place for rules. There's a place for advice. Obviously, I think there's a place for advice because I run a frickin' writing advice channel. But you have to parse everything that you see as advice and shape it to your situation. I'm not going to be able to advise on writing memoir. I've never written one, I've never edited one, I've never published one. So I don't know what sells a memoir. I can speak with some authority on what works and doesn't work in sci-fi, fantasy, horror, urban fantasy, because I read a lot of it and I publish a lot of it. But you have to figure out which of these rules works for you, what resonates. And they're really more suggestions, but that doesn't make a title that gets any engagement, so feel free to be as outraged as if I called them rules. You can still call me a moron in the comments. I live with cats. I'm well acquainted with being told I'm stupid, just not always in human speak. So without further ado, I know that was wrong. Without further ado, here's rule number 1. No, really, cut down on your adverbs. I know, let go of your pearls and let go of your adverbs. You almost certainly use too many of them, and it'll make your books better if you trim them. You probably use too many adjectives too, if your work is anything like the stuff that's come across my desk in the last 2 years. I see a ton of stuff lately with just minimum of 2 adverbs for every noun. And not every boat needs to be a massive gray ship. Not every piece of jewelry needs to be a shiny, glittery necklace. If you use really good adjectives and really good verbs, you can get away without needing to modify them with adverbs or pile a bunch of stuff on. When you use too many adjectives, it makes the sentence feel clunky. Sometimes it really works. But let's say someone walks into a scene and you're describing what they're wearing. If every piece of clothing that you mention has 2 adjectives in front of it, that's going to begin to feel very samey. And by the end of the paragraph, your reader's bored. They're like, yeah, I get it. They're shiny black shoes with buckles. They're tight-fitting pants that blouse out above the socks. They're flowing black shirt open to the navel. Yeah, I'm describing a dude's wardrobe that I saw at Dragon Con. But anyway, my point is that if you take the time and care to choose every word precisely and make sure that it's the best possible word for that sentence, then you can write more tightly and you won't have any sentences or paragraphs or books that feel overdone and overblown. You'll get your descriptions locked in and you can get on to the stuff that people actually care about, like character motivation and behavior and actions. So tighten up. Not everything needs to be described like it's a friggin' travel log. Unless you're David Attenborough and you're reading your own audiobook, and I have it on pretty good authority that David Attenborough does not watch this channel. If you do, love your work, Dave. 2, this one's the industry career thing, but it applies to writing as well. For God's sake, read. Read a lot. A lot, a lot. Then read more. And by read, I mean consume lots of books. I am not going to make a distinction between reading a print book, reading an ebook, and reading an audiobook. They all count. And if you are one of these people who claims that listening to an audiobook isn't reading, you are welcome to that opinion. You have the right to be as wrong as you want. But it's my channel. So here at Casa de Falstaff, listening to an audiobook counts as reading. By the way, a lot of my stuff is available on Audible. So if you like what you hear from me, you can check me out on Audible. But you've got to read. To be a writer, you have to read. And to be a published professional writer, you have to read in the genre that you're writing in. I know, you're so afraid that something's going to pollute your virgin ideas. Your ideas aren't that friggin' special, kid. I promise. They're really not. So read in the genre that you're working in. You absolutely need to be aware of what's going on in your genres right now. If you're writing fantasy and you haven't read Fourth Wing or any other romantasy, ACOTAR, any of the Sarah J. Maas stuff, you're missing a massive trend in the marketplace. If you're writing urban fantasy and you never read Jim Butcher, Charlene Harris, Sherilyn Kenyon, or Laurel K. Hamilton, then you're missing some masters of the craft that you can learn from. And here's the part where the people my age get mad at me. You have to read current shit. You must read what is being acquired and published and selling today. I'm not saying you have to read everything. If you don't like funny books that will sneak up on you and surprise you with how emotionally impactful they are, you don't have to read Dungeon Crawler Carl. If you don't care anything about cozy style fantasy, you don't have to read Legends and Lattes. If you don't care about really gorgeous production quality books, you don't have to buy the Wraithmarked edition of V.E. Schwab's A Darker Shade of Magic. You have to know what's going on today. I don't care how Robert Jordan did it. I really don't. I care how we're doing it today. I don't care how Tolkien did it, Bradbury did it, Heinlein did it. None of them. Do not care. Certainly don't care how Frank Herbert did it, because I have never been able to make it through Dune. Sorry. All of those people wrote phenomenal books. They are masters of the craft and pillars of the genre, and their stuff is old. If you want to know what people were writing for epic fantasy in the late 80s and early 90s, then by all means, read The Wheel of Time. And yes, I know the first book was published in 1990, but that means that it was written in the late 80s. But that's not how we write today. It's the same as watching Lionel Barrymore do Shakespeare and realize that he wouldn't be cast with those performances in community theater Hamlet today. Not that many community theaters are doing Hamlet. It's a very long play and a lot goes on. But anyway, you have to stay current. You need to read some John Scalzi. You need to read some Sarah J. Maas. You need to read some Rebecca Yarros. You need to read some Stephen Graham Jones. You need to read the current crop of up-and-coming masters of the craft. because that's what we're doing today. You don't study filmmaking in 2026 by exclusively studying Cecil B. DeMille. You also study some Christopher Nolan because he's doing it today and he's very good. You probably also study some Duffer Brothers or Russo Brothers. I don't know. You better be studying some Ryan Coogler and some Michael B. Jordan and some Jordan Peele. But you have to stay current in your reading. If you love the classics, that's great. But for everything you read that was published before the turn of the century, you must then read 2 things that were published within the last decade. Because to build a career, you have to know what a career today looks like. Number 3, and we're back to writing. I did mention we're alternating, right? Consider the source when accepting critique. I have a lot of people tell me, yeah, everybody that I've shown this book to loves it. Everybody that you've shown this book to is related to you. They love you. You have to consider how someone is approaching the work when they're offering a critique, whether they've read the finished product and they're giving a review. Those aren't for you, by the way. That's not a critique, that's a review. Reviews are for readers. Critiques are for writers. Not everyone knows how to tell a story, and even avid and invested readers may not be able to articulate exactly what doesn't work for them. The most important critics in the lifespan of a book are the people who are going to give or earn you money for that book. Your agent, your acquiring editor, your publisher, and eventually your readers who pay money for your book. Their opinions are worth far more than your beta readers or critique partners, especially if those beta readers or critique partners have never sold a book for publication. If they've never walked the walk, they may not be qualified to talk the talk. I have seen some spectacular critiques given in writing groups, and I've also seen some absolutely dreadful ones given, all by amateur and unpublished writers. So consider the source. Whenever someone gives you their opinion of your work, if they're not in a position to give you money for that work, take it with a grain of salt or a shaker. And there might be other things going on in their life that make someone not connect to a book. Here's an example of this. I work with a local science fiction convention, and at the end of every year, we ask for feedback from our attendees and our guests. And it's anonymous feedback. Anonymous in that we don't know who sends it in, but sometimes if the same person has given me that exact same gripe during the convention, I can piece things together. We had that happen last year. An author was complaining that their sales were not very good that year. When we were reviewing the surveys, we came to that, and I said, yeah, you can ignore that one. Everyone said, why? I said, well, I know who it came from. And indeed, this author did not sell well last year. This author also was flanked by 2 authors who had their best year ever at the convention. So the problem wasn't with their location in Author's Alley. The problem wasn't with the convention and the buying public overall. The problem was something with that author and their presentation. And I had talked to the author about that at the convention, and they understood that maybe this wasn't a convention problem, maybe it was a them problem. I'm not saying it 100% was, but I'm going to say it was probably 90. And I still like this writer. They're a friend of mine. But in this case, their criticism of the event overall, I ignored it. 4, back to publishing or building a writing career. Don't chase trends. Yes, I know. I just told you to read a lot of current fiction so that you know what's going on in the market. But that doesn't mean chase trends. That means understand what is happening in the market. But you also have to understand that publishing moves slowly. If you start writing your dungeon adventure with a talking animal now, by the time you finish it, sell it, and it comes to market, the fervor over Dungeon Crawler Carl won't be at the same fever pitch that it is right now, because nothing stays white hot forever. I hope it does stay. I hope Carl continues to sell very well. Matt's my friend. I wish him all the best. But let's be real. Nothing stays white hot forever. Taylor Swift is not the artist on everybody's lips right now like she was 6 months ago. I remember a few years ago, everybody on every writing podcast was telling every self-published author who wants to write to market to go write military science fiction because it was hotter than a firecracker and there weren't very many people writing on it. Then within 2 years, there were a bajillion people writing it, and all the same sales were diluted across 10 times as many people. So it wasn't white hot any longer. Write the book you want to write. Don't write in a subgenre just because it's selling a ton right now. Also, don't avoid writing a type of book because someone tells you, oh, nobody's buying that. I have listened to people tell me that vampires are dead in urban fantasy for 17 years and counting. I write vampires. I make a living writing vampires. I do okay. Even if you're self-publishing, don't try to chase trends. Because even if you don't have to go through a publisher and wait in line for your editorial, you've got to write a good book. It takes a couple of months. Even if you're writing 5,000 words a day, which is a lot, that's a month's worth of Monday through Friday writing days to get to a 100,000 word book. Then you have to revise it, get it edited, revise it again, hopefully get it edited again, revise it again, lay it out, put a good cover on it, and get it to market. By the time you do all that, the thing that everybody was clamoring for won't be what everyone wants to read. Look back at dystopian young adult trilogies. Hunger Games, Maze Runner, Divergent. Nobody cares. It doesn't take long for the market to get full. So write the book you want to write. You'll make more money. I promise. Number 5, back to craft. Write like you talk, unless you talk like an idiot. What I mean by this is that I see a ton of manuscripts come across that feel like somebody wrote it with a thesaurus right by their keyboard, and they swapped in a lot of obscure polysyllabic words to make themselves look smarter, or they use an odd, stilted sentence structure to make a book feel like an epic fantasy. And it really ends up sounding like somebody talking at a Ren fair. Just write the book. Write a good book. Tell a great story. Put an interesting plot in it, and craft great characters. And the book will sell. Don't sweat whether or not you're using heightened language and sounding like Gandalf, not my cat, the character. Sweat whether or not you have a distinctive narrative voice and whether or not the story's any good. Number 6, other writers are not your competition. This shelf here, full of books I didn't write. Some of them by friends, some of them by people I've never met. None of them are my competition. None of them affects my sales in any negative way. Ray Feist selling bajillions of copies of the Midkemia books, which I have contributed to those millions of copies sold, does not hurt my sales for anything on that shelf. Because anytime someone buys a book, any book, anywhere, it's good for me. Not just books I publish. You buy Red Shirts by John Scalzi, that's good for me. You buy Sandman Slim, that's good for me because you're getting books in hands. You're pushing forward the art of reading, which supports writers, which makes a better overall creative economy for me to exist in. One of the reasons I will always love Twilight and Stephenie Meyer is I also write vampire books. And she stopped after 4. 5. She wrote very few Twilight books, but she sold a boatload of them. And then people who loved those books finished the series, and they started looking around for other vampire books. Some of them probably found me. Some of them found me and hated my stuff. Some of them found me and loved it. Anytime someone buys a book, it's good for everyone who's trying to build a career as a writer. Other writers are never your competition. They can be your friends. They can be your partners. They can be your mentors. I've gotten piles of anthology sales because friends of mine were either editing an anthology and needed a story, or they were in an anthology and somebody dropped out and the editor asked them if they knew anyone who could write something quickly. They hooked me up, and I try to do the same any chance I get. Other writers are not your competition. It's not a zero-sum game. A zero-sum game is a game where every dollar you win had to come from someone else, like poker. It ain't pie. Just because somebody bought one of every Dungeon Crawler Carl book doesn't mean they're not going to buy one of every Quincy Harker Demon Hunter book. Frankly, I would love it if you went to Amazon right now and bought one of all of those and pre-order book 8, which I still need to do. Anyway, back to writing and tip number 7. Be careful of pop culture references in your book. If you're going to use them, either make them timeless and or ubiquitous, or make them Easter eggs. Or just accept that certain parts of your book will be out of date to a lot of readers in a few years. This is a problem with using tech in books too. Look at how the last season of Buffy differed from the first just because everybody had a cell phone. Jim Butcher uses a whole lot of Star Wars references in the Dresden Files, but he tends to keep his references to the big things that most people get and have become part of our cultural subconscious. Or, and this is when it's really well done, he uses references that even if the reader doesn't exactly know what it means, the context is super clear. In a couple of books, he has Harry call his apprentice Padawan. Even if you don't know that from Star Wars, the context makes it clear that he's using it like the TV show Kung Fu used grasshopper. And yeah, I am old enough to have watched David Carradine in the TV show Kung Fu. Matt Dinniman does it as well in Dungeon Crawler Carl. He does it a lot in Carl, but the one I love are the Sluggalos. The characters of the Sluggalos are very obviously a reference to Insane Clown Posse fans who refer to themselves as Juggalos. And he's got the Sluggalos wielding cleavers or hatchets, like the famous ICP Hatchet Man logo. They even shout whoop whoop. I don't remember if there are Fago references. Somebody tell me in the comments. But even if you know nothing about Insane Clown Posse, shout out to Violent J and Shaggy 2 Dope, you understand the Sluggalos and you understand how they behave. They're just nut jobs with hatchets. If you do know ICP, then it's a fun little Easter egg for you. So if you're in on the joke, it's great. If you're not in on the joke, it doesn't make you go, huh? It's just another critter with a weird name and odd behavior. Ooh, this is a good one. Number 8, back to business. Rejection isn't personal. I only know one writer who has never gotten a rejection for their fiction, and no, I will not out them here. But they are very successful. But it's almost never personal. Sometimes it has little or nothing to do with you or your book. It might be that that publisher or that agent just bought a very similar book. Take a look at the 2 large press published pieces of Dramione fanfic with the VIN numbers filed off that released last year right on top of one another with covers by the same cover artist. Yeah, that happened. It may be that there's something too similar in the press's line. If you send me a snarky urban fantasy, it's going to need to be very different from the snarky urban fantasy that I write before we're going to be able to really push forward with it. Or maybe it's a dead dad story and the editor's father died a few months ago and they don't want to work on a dead dad book. It might not have anything to do with you. It might just be timing. Or maybe it's the writing. Maybe your writing just isn't there yet. But it's almost never because the person looking to acquire your manuscript doesn't like you. In most cases, they don't know you. Just what you put in the query letter and what you put on the page. And you will get rejected. One of my senior editors, who I continue to publish, have published multiple books from, loves to tell the story of the first book she submitted to us that I rejected. Book wasn't ready. Nothing personal. Just wasn't the time for that project. Back to craft. Number 9. This is the final tip for writing. Blow something up every 10,000 words. Not literally. Don't go set off fireworks in your backyard, but on the page. You don't have to blow something up literally, but stuff has to happen. If you've gone 10,000 words in a genre novel and no one's gotten shot at, shot, stabbed, laid, or at least punched, then you probably need more stuff to happen in your book. Genre fiction is not navel gazing. Stuff happens. Plot is important. A lot of times we develop characters through plot and the character's reaction to the things that happen around them. Make sure things are happening. If the middle of your book is saggy, and my middle is pretty saggy, but I'm working on it, Punch it up with a hand grenade or two. Number 10, the final be-all, end-all tip. There is no one path. There are lots of different ways to be successful in publishing. When I started in this business, self-publishing had just emerged as a viable way to make a living. Now there are probably more self-published authors making their living off book sales than there are New York published authors doing so. This is just my anecdotal evidence, but I'd put pretty good money on it. You can self-publish. You can work with a small press. You can sell a book to New York. Hell, you can do all three. But you do need to take control of your career, figure out what you want it to look like, and then begin to build it. Don't let anybody tell you you have to do it this way. Figure out if you want Jim Butcher's career or Matt Dinniman's. Then look at how they came to market, what they did to improve their craft and their business, and see if they have tactics that you can apply to your work. Maybe you want to use tie-in work to break in and start publishing your own books later. Lots of great authors have done this. Keith DeCandido does a lot of tie-in work and writes original books. Not that his tie-in stuff isn't original, but IP that he owns. Chris Jackson has written a ton of stuff for Pathfinder and a ton of stuff that he created the entire IP for. There are lots of ways to build a career. If you want to self-publish some books or publish them with a small press, then sell a series to New York, hit every major bestseller list, then sell your self-pubbed backlist to big publishers for a bunch of money, you know who you are, and I'm proud of you. Rock on. The fact is that while publishing is still really hard, it's a brutal business. And there's a huge amount of arrogance that goes into creating a career in publishing because you're telling lies on paper and asking people to give you money for them. The level of arrogance that requires is staggering. But it's hard. It's a very difficult business. But I firmly believe that it is better now than it likely ever has been. There are more paths to publication than there have ever been. So carve your path. Blaze your trail. Don't try to be the next me, or the next Jonathan Mayberry, or the next Sherilyn Kenyon, or the next Sylvia Moreno Garcia. Be the first you. You do you, boo-boo. Whatever silly way you want to phrase it, you get to build your career the way you want to. Now get out there and go build it. But before you do that, please take a minute to give us a like, leave a comment telling me which of these pieces of advice you thought were awesome, and maybe subscribe. And if you've already subscribed and you want your name on the wall like these awesome people, you can become a member of the channel and you can support us that way. And there's links down in the description where you can go to our Shopify and buy books. And I don't know, go read something. Till next time. Bye.